I was working a lot more on teams and realizing how much people that are creative think differently than other people.
So today I have Wendy with me on the Innovator series to talk a little bit about who she is and what she does. So, just for anyone who doesn't know already, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Wendy Willard, and I am speaking to you from San Diego, in Southern California. It's where I live right now. Lived for almost 5 years, and I call myself the Strengths Encourager.
Awesome. Do you want to talk about what that means?
Yeah, so my background is actually in art and design. I went to art school, and I did for many years web design and graphic design and user interface design and all kinds of stuff like that. And then about 6 years ago, I went back to school to study organizational leadership because I started doing more in the realm of people leadership. So I was working a lot more on teams and realizing how much people that are creative think differently than other people, and how much I think we need more diversity among our leaders, among our people leaders. We need a diversity of thought, right? We need a lot of different types of thinkers, and not just the stereotypical MBA thinker, right? The stereotypical business minded person. So I went back to school to study that. And in that process, I heard about the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And it's not a personality tool. It's not a personality test like a lot of tests you might have heard of before. It's actually a performance assessment. So it assesses what motivates you to perform, what motivates you to act, right? To do things, to execute, to influence people, to build relationships. What motivates you to do those things? And what energizes you when you're doing those things? And I thought it was really fascinating. And I got really excited about strengths, and I started doing it more. And one thing led to another. And now like I said, I call myself the Strengths Encourager because I love encouraging people's natural strengths.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I definitely feel the same way. Like a lot of what we're doing is if you can really kind of find out what someone's strengths is then just enabling that into things that they're interested in, and then kind of being able to kind of unlock that really helps with everything. So, I mean, I would be really interested in like think talking to you about like what makes your strengths test different, because also with the personality test, I would say, I mean, like the definition of personality is kind of like what forms someone's individual character, and I think that is related to strengths. But like what drew you to this specific strengths test, and how is it different from other tools like personality tests and similar tests?
Yeah, so one of the things that I love about Gallup's work is that it's evidence-based, right? So it's not rooted in pop culture or one person's ideas. It's based on a ton of research. And so a lot of this research comes from 50, 60, even 70 and 80 years ago, where people were trying to figure out what makes someone a good leader. They thought, hey, could we come up with a list of strengths that people have to have in order to make a good leader? Because if we can come up with that list, then we can sell it, right? Then we can create something that people would pay us for, and we could create leaders. We could create good leaders. That's what people were trying to research. But what they actually found is the total opposite of that. They found that in order to be a good leader, you need to know your strengths, use your strengths well, and then surround yourself by people that are strong in the areas that you're weak. And that is how you can be a good leader. So there's no magical set of strengths that could make you the president of the United States, for example, or there's no magical set of strengths that makes you, the perfect CEO, or the perfect scientist. It's all about knowing your strengths and using them well. And so Gallup's research shows that there are 34 strengths that are inherent to humans. And what they do with this assessment, the adult version, is that they rank those strengths for you. So you get a ranking from 1 to 34, and those at the top of your list, like 1 through maybe 10 or 15, those are the strengths that when you use them, you actually get energy. You feel good. You want to do more of them. Maybe you get into this state of flow where you lose track of time because you're doing it and it feels so good and you just want to keep doing more of it, right? But the strengths at the bottom of your list, you can do those things, but they drain your energy instead of giving you energy. It's the stuff that when someone asks you to do it, it's the stuff that stays on your to-do list forever. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that one. The stuff that kind of that you're like, when you're doing it, you look at the clock and you think it's been an hour, but it's only been 2 minutes. Those are the things that are not strengths for you. And so, a lot of things I talk about with people is how do we work out of our areas of weakness, right? What do we do when we have to do stuff that's not a strength for us? How can we use our strengths to do those things, for example? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that is something that's just like incredibly useful, and also something that a lot of people they're kind of thinking about it in the wrong way, where they might I mean, I really like your description of like your strengths is something that you get energy from, because you could still maybe you could still be relatively good at something that is quote unquote your weakness, but it's just something that you're probably going to be more naturally good at your strengths because you enjoy doing them. So you're going to do them more and then get better at it. So, I mean, then instead, I mean, I guess then you could think about it as things that you enjoy and then things that you're kind of naturally inclined to do, which then you get better at. So, yeah, I mean, also one thing I did want to you mentioned that I forgot who exactly, but they did research and found 34 strengths. Are you still building on that research? Because I mean, it's also there's probably more to be discovered and not just like 34 strengths, and it's also how you think about it, because you have 34 labels for certain strengths, but some people might think about that word differently. But I'd be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the organization that owns all of that, intellectual property at this point is called Gallup. And they have, over the years, they've refined it a bit. So I think at one point there was 36, they might have went down to 32, then kind of settled on 34, as they call them kind of talent buckets. So, there's a lot that can go into that bucket, and there's certainly a lot of nuance between them. They put them into 4 domains or categories. So the 4 categories are the first one is the thinking strengths, and those are strengths that are focused on what are we going to do. When you think about a school project, for example, that you have to start, right? You just get assigned a group project, and the first thing you have to do is figure out what are we doing, right? And people that are really good at the thinking strengths, those are the people that are going to be really excited about coming up with answering the question of what are we going to do? And then you have influencing strengths. And those are the strengths that are focused on why. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? And once they answer the question of why, then anybody strong in the influencing strengths, they want to bring attention to messages that must be heard. So once you figure out the what, and then you figure out the why, And once the people that are strong in the influencing strengths understand the why, then they're going to influence everybody else to say, okay, we should do this. I think this is the right way to go. You know, then you have the relationship builder strengths. And relationship builder strengths are the ones that are focused on the people. They're focused on the who. Who's going to do this? Who does this impact? How are we going to work together? Right? So, as humans, because you guys know that whenever you work on a school project, at some point in the project, someone says, I don't want to do this anymore. Or this isn't fun. Or I don't like the way you said that, right? There can be some disharmony, for example. And so the relationship builder strengths are the ones that are focused on saying, hey guys, we can do this. Let's work together. One of those strengths is positivity, another harmony. There are the strengths that say, let's make sure we all do our part. So those are the relationship builder strengths. And then the last category is called the executing strengths. And those are the doers. Those strengths are the ones that focus on the how. How are we actually going to get this done, right? How is it going to be finished? And they're the strengths that make sure that there's actually something to turn in by the deadline, right? So those are kind of the four categories. And then there's a bunch of strengths, individual strengths inside of each of those categories. And they're definitely growing. Gallup is increasing all the time their knowledge around all of those. And for example, in June, they just put out a book that talks about well-being related to your strengths. So how individual strengths can feel better, what they need to feel better, and what can kind of make them feel yucky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that is a really good structure to think about, like your kind of like your strengths and how you should kind of go about trying to do certain things. But it's also a lot of it is kind of putting labels and structures around thinking about yourself. I think that that's something that's a real value, that's like the real value proposition that comes from these tests, like the strengths tests and other personality tests, is like giving you a structure to actually think about yourself. But what would you say
Exactly.
is like a way to think about like after thinking about what are my strengths, what are certain aspects about myself that make certain tasks easier for me than other people, thinking about how to leverage that within your responsibilities, within activities that you do from day to day.
Oh yeah. So so I think about this a lot from different perspectives, from professional for people in the workplace. Like for example, right before this call, I was encouraging someone in a professional job in England, actually. Uh, but so we were in that situation talking about how she can use her strengths best within her team that she's working on. But also, I talk with parents sometimes and kids, students, about how they can use their strengths within their family, how they can use their strengths within a school setting. I always say that your family is your first chance to practice being on a team. So your team, your family team is 4 people, right? The 2 of you plus your parents, right?
Not counting our dog.
Not counting your dog. I'm sure your dog has strengths, but it might be stuff like sleeping and chasing rabbits or something. I don't know. That's my dog's strength. So we would look at your family team and how can you work together to accomplish whatever you need to accomplish. So thinking about that structure that I mentioned, that group of 4 things, categories, what's something that your family what's a project that you're currently working on, or that maybe you're thinking about starting?
Oh my gosh. Well, we have so many things that we're working on like every single day. but it's like one of the things that we're doing. Well, for a while, when our all of our friends went back to public schools because we're homeschooled, then um, we didn't know any homeschoolers. So one project that we all worked on was we made like
Homeschool
eight.
meetups.
Yeah, we made like 8 Facebook groups, and now we have like 300 people across all of them. This was about a month ago, and then we started marketing it to try to get like find more local homeschoolers that we could hang out with. So that was like one project that we worked on.
Okay, so that's a great example. And I love that you already have, that you had lots of examples that you thought of, right? Because that's awesome. It tells me that you're already working as a team. Because here's the thing, no one person can do all of those 4 categories well, right? That would be what we called being well-rounded, which when I was growing up, they told us all we needed to be well-rounded. We needed to be good at everything. But what we've realized is it's not possible to be good at everything, right? And it actually is really hard, and it makes you feel really bad to try to be good at everything, because you will undoubtedly fail. Instead, teams need to be well-rounded. Teams need to work together. So that project that you just talked about, the idea of, hey, we're homeschool. What was the initial question you were asking? Was it, how do we meet more people?
Yeah.
How do we meet more homeschoolers?
Yeah.
Okay. Who came up with the question? Who had the question first?
We kind of all did. I mean, it's kind of funny because when you were talking about like having a well-rounded, when we before we found out about your strengths test, we were more focused on like using the Myers-Briggs, the 16 personalities test. And my dad and my mom are opposite. My sister and I are opposite, and we're like all in between each other at like and so that was, I mean,
I
think
don't know. We're almost opposite.
no, we are opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's kind of finding other people who really balance yourself out is really cool, because then cuz I think Isla is definitely like good at a lot of the things that I'm bad at, and then so we kind of all balance each other out in that sense. So, I mean, when it came to like that one specific project, it was like, well, it was kind of like my sister, she's more extroverted, and so she was kind of
I
feeling.
don't know. You're becoming more and more extroverted.
Yeah.
Especially around kids.
Yeah, but it's also, so she was so since she's extroverted, then she was feeling kind of lonely because all of our friends went back to school, so we like weren't hanging out with them anymore. And then my dad was like, okay, we should probably solve that problem.
Yeah, he's just like always trying to solve problems, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Fit into one of your 4 buckets.
It does. So there's several strengths that like to solve problems. And so it depends on the motivation. It depends on like why he wants to solve the problem. So, and you'd have to tell me whether on his results, whether he was higher in a strength called restorative or strategic. Those would be the 2 that would come up in my brain that I might think about that could be for him. But okay, so I heard you say that first you identified that there was a problem, right? that that Isla had a problem with, hey, I want to connect with more kids. And then you started thinking, how can we fix this? Yes. And I think, Sume, you are really a thinker, is based on looking at your Strengths Explorer results. The first one that came up is Discoverer, right? That fits into what will become the adult strategic thinking domain, right? The thinkers, the ones that are, I call them also the viewers. They're providing the view or the path forward, right? So generally speaking, people that are strong in that area like to think about ideas, like to think about possibilities, and brainstorm, right? Like to spend time thinking, Sometimes it's people that are more focused on brainstorming with other people. Like that's me. One of my strengths is ideation, but I also have the strength of communication. So I love to talk about ideas. But my husband has the strength of ideation plus the strength of intellection, which means he likes to think about ideas. So his is more internal and mine is more external. It's one of the reasons why I love this better than the MBTI, because it's more defined. It's able to get more into the specifics of not just whether you're introverted or extroverted, but in what situations are you introverted or extroverted. And because for me, when I took MBTI, I came up at like 51% extroverted and 49% introverted, which is almost exactly the same. But strengths really helps me understand the situations that I like to be extroverted and the situations that I like to be introverted. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's also what you just described. I also, for the MBTI, I tested as intuitive, which is like kind of thinking about ideas and stuff like that. So
Yeah. So, okay, so thinking about that project that you had as a family, so you had to answer this question of like, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? But then who actually created the Facebook groups, for example? Who actually did some of the, was that what you did? Was it the Facebook groups, or were there other things you did, like
well,
execute?
we also made a
Facebook
website page for it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and a Slack group.
So who did all that stuff?
Well, we kind of all did different things.
And Daddy. Sume and Daddy.
And Isla went to the park meetups.
Yep, that's what I did.
So
Yeah.
Isla, it sounds like you are more people oriented than task oriented.
I don't know. I think
So
it
you
just
think,
kind of depends what the tasks are.
okay. When I have a grid that I usually show to people when I do team sessions or family sessions or anything, and the influencing and relationship builder strengths are more focused on people, whereas the strategic thinking strengths and the executing strengths are more focused on tasks. And so I can see that, Sume, you're more focused on that how and why, the strategic thinking and the executing. And probably it sounds like, Isla, you're still young and you're still developing for sure, but it sounds like you're more focused on the who, right? Like the people, and then why are we doing this? So that's my guess.
Mm. Yeah, also one thing I did want to talk about is, I think this was like the first question I asked you, was kind of how to think about taking the test. And also, and that's one thing that there's several concerns, and also just thinking about how to actually use it most efficiently, like use these tests most efficiently is like, well, on the 16 personalities test, they have an article about why kids under 13 shouldn't take their test, but it was like concerns such as you're still developing, and if you kind of like when you're thinking about, oh, this is my weakness, I'm just not going to do that because I'm bad at it, like the concerns such as that, and a lot of it is kind of like, all of these can be mitigated just by having conversations, which is a lot of what we do within our community.
Sume, you're almost 13, then you can take the test.
Well,
she's taken the test like 5 times.
I was like 7. But it's kind of like with having conversations about, okay, well, you're still working on these things. Even if you're an adult, you're still developing, you can still change. But like thinking about,
it's a little harder.
Yeah.
Because you had so much experience.
Yeah. Concerns such as that, and how to take it most effectively when just thinking about, like, all of these are going to be imperfect models. They're not going to account for everything about yourself. And so, I mean, those were just like two things that came to mind for me. But like, what would you say is kind of the mindset that you should go into taking these tests to get the most useful results?
Yeah, I love the way you're thinking about all of that. I definitely tell everybody, you take the assessment, they put a time limit on you. For the adult version, there's 20 seconds per paired statement. So they basically say things like, I lead from my heart, I follow my heart, or I follow my head. And you have 20 seconds to decide which of those statements sounds more like you. And it's not like you have to say all the way over here or all the way over here. You can pick buttons in between, right? You can say I'm a little more this way or I'm a little more this way. But the idea is, what does your gut say? What is your first natural instinct? Don't overthink it. Don't say, well, in these situations, I'm like this, or these situations, I'm like this. You just say, which one attracts you the most, right? Which one sounds like you the most? And then you move on to the next, there's 177 of those on the adult session, on the adult question. It can take about 45 minutes for most people to complete it. But then what we do is we look at the results and we ask questions. We say, does this sound like you? Do the strengths at the top of this list, do they all energize you, right? Do they all give you satisfaction? When you do these things, do you feel impactful around, within the groups that you're working? And I haven't had, okay, only one time have I had a situation where someone disagreed with the results and she knew exactly why. She took the test as a part of a pre-employment package. So she took the test in order to get a job, and she answered the questions based on what she thought the employer would want. And so it wasn't really her. And it's an example of where she's very empathetic. And empathy probably, when she and I talked, we realized that empathy probably is maybe number 1 or number 2 for her. But on the results, it came up at number 30 because she was squashing her empathy. She was choosing the opposite of her empathy every time because she was afraid that empathy wouldn't serve her well in that job. And it was really sad that, that's what she thought, because she wasn't being true to herself. And empathy is a wonderful trait. We need more empathy, I think, in our world. And once she was given the ability, the chance to actually express her normal empathy, express herself, she felt a lot more comfortable, just in her own skin, I think. So it's important to look at the results and ask questions. Does this make sense for you? And if not, why? Right? So with her, with all the people, with the hundreds of people that now I've worked with through this, she's the only person that has disagreed with the results. And we know exactly why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's also like, just with that, it's kind of like, that's interesting, because when we were when we were thinking about, like, okay, well, what is the actual value that we're getting from these tests, is kind of like being able to, I mean, a lot of what we used it for is having the question so you can start thinking about yourself, so you can have some place to start and some place, like some framework to start thinking about yourself. And so it's kind of like taking the questions and then just kind of like thinking deeply about yourself and like who you are and how you're different and how you can leverage that. So I mean, yeah, I think that's just like really useful, and I'm glad I got to learn a little bit more, because I did take the kids version, so it's a lot less detailed. But yeah, I mean, I see a lot of parallels in the way of like of how it's being used, and just like, and I think it's just a really valuable way to learn about how, like, where you're gonna be more comfortable, where you're gonna just be naturally more interested and better at certain things. So
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say is that I have a sticky note on my monitor here that is something that was a reminder to me, and it's now what I share with everybody that I work with. And it says, you have competence you need confidence. So there are things, the point of it is that there are things that you are gifted at doing. Most of the time, my job is just to give you the confidence to recognize that, hey, I'm really good at this, and then give you that confidence to move forward, to own it, right? To say, I'm good at this, and this is how I've been gifted, and here's how I can use that to the benefit of the teams that I'm working with. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's I really enjoyed taking the test and seeing the results, because I mean, prior to that I had already spent a lot of time thinking about a lot of the same things. So it was also cool to just kind of get another structure of thinking about it. And I think that, I mean, it's also, I didn't I didn't take the adult version, but it is very detailed. And I mean, I saw my dad's results, and how it was like all structured with all the different strengths. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, the kids version, basically what that does is it has bigger buckets. So it gave you discoverer, achieving, and organizer, right? So discoverer is a group of thinking strengths. And what they say is that as you grow older, it becomes more focused. And so maybe, in the strategic thinking strengths, that thinking category, I think there are like 7 or 8 strengths there. And so as you grow, then it will become more refined to the specific strengths inside of that category. And most people, Gallup officially says that, it's 13 and up that can take the adult version. But they also recommend that if you take it before age 18, that you retake it after age 18, because of the very reasons that you talked about, right? You're still growing, you're still developing. Their research shows that about 7 to 7.5%. So, or I'm saying this wrong, it's 7 out of 10. So like 70% will stay the same on your assessment. It's just that things will move around based on kind of your season of life. So if you're in college and learner is one of your strengths, it'll probably be your top, right? If you're in school. But once you get out of school, maybe you're working, maybe it's 5 years later, you take the assessment again, learner might move down a little because you're not actively using it as much, perhaps. This is just an example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about the strengths testing and all and I will definitely be looking into Gallup, because I think that's really interesting. But thank you so much for joining. Do you want to just say how people can get in touch with you if they are interested in what you do?
Yep. thestrengthsencourager.com is my website, and certainly happy to have chats with anybody who wants to learn more. You can also visit, gallup.com to learn more about just their boatloads of research. And I am a Gallup certified strengths coach. So I'm listed on their website, but you can also just go to mine, thestrengthsencourager.com.
Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.